Hi everybody, Dr. Joe Dispenza here. Welcome to the Flow Summit. I want to take a few moments and talk to you about my mission and my purpose. Since 1986, I have had a sincere interest in demystifying the mystical so that people have within their reach all the tools to begin to create a better life for themselves. And when I started this journey, most of the science that supports where we are today was limited. But if you look at some of the contemporary models of science, and I think that science is the contemporary language of mysticism, that building a model of understanding to help people understand what they're doing and why, how to create a better life for themselves, allows the how to get easier. And if you can combine a little quantum physics with a little neuroscience, with a little endocrinology, with a little psychoneuroimmunology, the mind-body connection, or even epigenetics, each one of those sciences are sciences that speak to possibility. And so I now know, since 1986, that this is a time in history where it's not enough to know. This is a time in history to know how. And when people begin to gain knowledge and information, knowledge is the precursor to experience. And every time they learn new things, they make new connections in their brain. Their learning is making new synaptic connections. So it starts in the mind. It starts with a thought. So as you begin to learn new knowledge and you begin to assemble new neurological structures, the key then is to be able to repeat that information, to review it, to study it, to talk about it. And if you take a group of people and you put them together that are interested in evolving their understandings and creating a better life for themselves, or seeing if their thoughts have some effect on their destiny, that knowledge then is information. And information and knowledge creates awareness, and awareness is consciousness, and you can't have consciousness without energy. So people, as they learn knowledge, they begin to change their energy. If they can review that information and they can talk about it and share it with one another, build a model of understanding, then they begin to fire and wire those circuits in their brain and they begin to remember that information. So as they talk about it and they build that model, they're installing the neurological hardware in their brain in preparation for an experience. So then when they take that knowledge and they personalize it, they apply it, they demonstrate it, they initiate it in some way and they do something differently, getting their behaviors to match their intentions or their actions equal to their thoughts, getting their mind and body working together is going to create a new experience. Now, experience then, the beauty of experience is that experience then further enriches the brain. In fact, when you're in the midst of an experience, then gangs of neurons or jungles of neurons begin to organize themselves into networks, reinforcing the philosophical circuits, the intellectual information. And the moment those neurons begin to organize into networks, the brain makes a chemical, and that chemical is called a feeling or an emotion. And the moment you start to feel the emotions of a new experience, whether you start feeling abundant or you start feeling free or you're inspired or more compassion or love for life, that's the moment you're teaching your body chemically to understand what your mind has intellectually understood. So if knowledge is for the mind, then experience is for the body. And we can say that experience causes you to embody the truth of that philosophy in your body. That means then you're beginning to change your genetic destiny. You begin to rewrite your biological program. The key, though, is not just doing it once. The key is to be able to reproduce the experience, to begin to make it a skill. And if you can keep applying and doing it over and over again and practicing it, over time you're going to neurochemically condition your mind and body to begin to work as one. And when you've done something so many times that your body now knows how to do it as well as your mind, now it's becoming more innate in you and you're beginning to master that philosophy. It's becoming easy, it's becoming automatic, it's becoming effortless, it's becoming more natural for you. And in fact, you know how to do it, but you don't know how you know how, and you're moving into a new state of being. So then my interest and my passion is to teach people how to go from philosophy to initiate to master, from knowledge to experience to wisdom, from mind to body to soul, from thinking to doing to being, and from learning it with your head, applying it with your hands, and knowing it by heart. And I believe that we have all the neurological and biological machinery to do this. And I can say now without a doubt that common people around the world are doing the uncommon. And that's an exciting time because they're healing themselves of diseases. Some of them are genetic disorders that science and medicine had no solution for. They're creating new jobs. They're creating new opportunities. They're creating new relationships. They're creating new careers. They're having mystical experiences that are changing them forever. And the beauty behind this is that it's a formula, and nobody is excluded from the formula. And just like anything else, it takes practice in the beginning, but as you develop the skill, it'll get easier. So then what are the limits that we have as human beings as we face crisis, or we face disease or diagnosis and loss? Do we typically use something outside of us, something to change how we feel inside of us? And that's for the most part the old model of reality, but people are beginning to learn how to self-regulate. They're learning how to change their internal state of being without relying on something outside of them. Now, what's the importance behind that? They tend to be more self-reliant, and they tend to resolve issues in their lives without relying on anyone or anything. So demystifying the process since 1986 has been my journey. And I started looking at, after my own personal injury and my own experience of healing, I started looking at other people that had similar health conditions or had chronic health conditions, and they were treating conventionally or unconventionally, and they were staying the same or getting worse, and then all of a sudden they got better. And so I traveled to 17 different countries and looked to see what the commonalities were with these people, interviewing hundreds and hundreds of people that had spontaneous remissions from disease. And it turns out they had four common things. First thing is that they believed that there was an intelligence that lived within them that was giving them life. And this intelligence, of course, is a consciousness, and consciousness is awareness, and awareness is paying attention. So they began to realize that this intelligence that was giving them life was keeping their heart beating and digesting their food and organizing those trillions of functions that happen on a moment-to-moment basis in our body. That body in the expression of life is a miracle in and of itself, and that they realized that they couldn't do the healing, that this intelligence could heal way better than them. So they decided, to develop a relationship with this intelligence, to take time and connect with it, to begin to commune with it, to give it some instructions, to give it a plan, a template, and begin to decide that if they had a relationship with it, if they could be present with it and design some future outcome, that once they were clear and felt good about that intention, that they could surrender that creation, surrender their disease to a greater mind, and begin to replace it with a new idea of who they wanted to be. And that intelligence then began to respond and began to make changes in their health. The second thing that I discovered in the commonalities was that these people all of a sudden took responsibility for their disease. And they didn't say it was my ex that did it to me, or it was the loss of my partner, or my boss is a tyrant and they're the reason I am this way. They got beyond that state of victimization, and they realized that it was the mismanagement of their own thoughts and emotions that created their disease. Now, this is an important moment, because most people have crisis or trauma in their life, and the stronger the emotion that they feel from some condition in their life, more altered they are inside of them, the more they pay attention to the cause. And that's when the brain freezes an image, and that's called a memory. So then people then have experiences in their life from many years past, and they're living by the same emotions, and those emotions are connected to past memories. And for the most part, they're spending the majority of their biological life in their past. So then those emotions tend to influence our thoughts. Those thoughts make certain chemicals for us to feel the same emotions. Those same emotions influence our same thoughts, and the brain makes the same chemicals, and people get caught in these loops of thinking and feeling and feeling and thinking. And so fear, unworthiness, guilt, shame, suffering, pain, anger, frustration, resentment, those emotions are derived from the hormones of stress, and it's a scientific fact that the long-term effects of the hormones of stress really signal the genes to create disease. And not knowing the words that I'm using right now, people intuitively understood that it was their own mismanagement of their thoughts and emotions that probably created their health condition. And those emotions of stress, of the stress hormones, in fact, the long-term effects really begin to break the body down. And so they're also very addictive, those emotions, because they give the brain and body a rush of energy. So I started studying stress in very significant detail, because I wanted to understand that what was the main reason for health conditions and disease in our culture. And in fact, it's because of lifestyle. It's not because of genes. And so when people get caught in these loops of thinking and feeling and feeling and thinking, their body is their unconscious mind. If they feel the same emotion that's connected to some past experience, their body is believing it's in the same past experience every single day. And I started looking at the concept of epigenetics, and epigenetics says that genes don't create disease. It's the environment that signals the gene that creates disease. Well, the end product of an experience in your environment is called an emotion. So if you're living by the same emotion every single day, and those emotions are derived from the hormones of stress, in a sense, you're signaling the same gene every single day, and the body's not getting any new information from the environment. And if you do that over and over again, now you're headed for a genetic destiny. So I started to realize the effects of emotional and psychological stress, which are far greater than physical stress or physical trauma or chemical imbalance or chemical stress, that most stressors or stresses end up as psychological or emotional stress. And people become addicted to these emotions, and I realized that they use the problems and conditions in their life to reaffirm their addiction to some emotion. They really look for the circumstances in their life that can trigger that emotion, that it makes them feel something. And just like an addict that's addicted to a drug or a chemical, having the ability to go through the withdrawals of suffering, to go through the withdrawals of anger and hostility and judgment, requires a tremendous amount of consciousness and awareness and a tremendous amount of will. And so these people that began to heal started to give up those emotional states and forgive their past, forgive themselves, forgive the people in their past, and start to take responsibility for themselves. And it was really interesting, because as I was doing the interviews, I also realized that people began to become aware that they were addicted to the life that they didn't even like. And if they were truly going to change themselves, they had to break those addictions and change the view of the way they perceive their life. In other words, we don't see things how they are, we see things how we are. And so there was a strong change that took place by overcoming these emotional states and stopping the cycle of thinking and feeling. And when you do break that redundancy of that cycle, the challenge is that you feel unfamiliar. Things start to feel uncomfortable because you're no longer in the known state. But the redundancy of thinking and feeling and feeling and thinking over time conditions your body to subconsciously become the mind of that emotion, which means then to change is to be greater than your body, the body that's been conditioned to be the mind. So the body then emotionally typically lives in the past because the emotion is stored in the body. So then a person then who wants to create a new future and change something about themselves literally has to transform that emotion, that fear, into courage, that pain into joy, that anger into compassion, that hatred into love. And this takes a great effort and a great persistence. And so people then, when they think about their problems, when they think about the challenges in their life, if they're thinking about them and the thoughts producing an emotion that's associated with it, then in a sense, they're turning on the same stress response just by thought alone. And I started realizing that we all do this, which means then we are addicted to our thoughts, and our thoughts can literally make us sick. So then I thought, well, if our thoughts could make us sick, can our thoughts make us well? And so it caused me then to realize that the greatest habit that we have to break really is the habit of being ourselves, because so many people are programmed to act and think and feel in certain ways. Why? Because if you're living by the same emotions and the same brain circuitry, and the brain is a record of the past, and it is, and emotions are the chemical signature of past experiences, that most people spend the majority of their life as a personality living in the past. Well, if they're in their familiar past, then they crave the predictable future because they're looking for the same feelings to reaffirm who they think they are. So to change then is to execute a will that's greater than the body as the mind, to execute a will and a persistence that's greater than any program. And so then you have to become conscious then of your unconscious thoughts. You have to begin to pay attention to how you speak and how you act. You have to look at emotions that you live by on a daily basis and feel, and all of a sudden name those emotions as guilt or suffering or unhappiness, and realize that it's okay to observe those states of mind and body, and to know yourself so well and become conscious of those unconscious states, so conscious that you don't go unconscious the rest of your day. So if you wake up every morning and you run through the same routine as you did the day before, then it makes sense that your familiar yesterday is going to be your predictable tomorrow. And people do this 95% of the time. They're just programmed to demonstrate the same behaviors, think the same thoughts, create the same experiences, all to reaffirm the same emotion that reaffirms their identity. So then breaking that routine then requires another act of will, a will that's greater than the program, because most people lose their free will to a program, and their body's being dragged into a predictable future based on what they did in the past. In fact, the habit, which is a redundant set of automatic unconscious thoughts, behaviors, and emotions that's acquired through repetition, it becomes the habit of being yourself. And so I realized that the greatest habit we have to break is the habit of being ourselves. So then I started thinking, wow, how we think, how we act, and how we feel is called our personality, and our personality really creates our personal reality. So then if you're going to change your personal reality, you're going to change your life, you have to change your personality. And as you start thinking about what you think about, and you start observing how you're acting, and you notice how you're feeling, this is the first time when you become consciousness that you're not in the program, but you're the consciousness observing the program. And that's how we begin to separate ourselves from our biology. In other words, who's doing this observing of your thoughts, behaviors, and emotions? That's you when you're not in the program. So that level of metacognition or mindfulness allows us to begin to modify who we are to do a better job in life. And so that brought me to the third discovery, and it was persistent and consistent with just about every single person. They started asking themselves, well, if I only have a certain amount of time to live, or I have these handicaps, or I'm reliant on all these different drugs, or I'm compromised in some way, who do I want to be? Can I reinvent myself? Can I become somebody else? And people started to literally begin to think differently. They started to say, what thoughts do I want to fire and wire in my brain? What do I want to believe in? And they started thinking about how they would live their life if they were healed. Now, this is a great question, because most people don't think outside of how they feel. In other words, they can't think greater than how they feel. And if you can't think greater than how you feel, then you're thinking in the past. So again, it takes an enormous amount of effort to begin to say, if I were truly to get better, how would I live my life? And the natural way we're wired is to create. And they would close their eyes and begin to literally rehearse in their minds how they were going to live their life if they had another chance. Now, it brings up this concept called mental rehearsal, which I'm very passionate about. Your brain is typically a record of the past, but if you rehearse properly and you start to decide who you're going to be in some future, and you begin to put yourself into the scene, and you begin to live in that future reality in the present moment as you rehearse it, the brain doesn't know the difference between the actual experience and what you're rehearsing in your mind. And so you begin to install neurological hardware in your brain to look like the experience has already happened. Now, the brain is no longer a record of the past. It's starting to become a map of the future. And so there's been numerous experiments on mental rehearsal to show that we can change our brain just by thinking differently, or in a sense, prime our brain into the future. And piano players, people that have never played the piano before, that have closed their eyes and mentally rehearsed for 2 hours a day for 5 days, at the end of 5 days, they've actually grown the same circuits in their brain that people who actually physically practice the activity, which means the brain doesn't know the difference between the real experience than the one you're rehearsing in your mind when you're truly present. So if it turns out that if you keep doing that, the hardware becomes a software program. The brain starts firing and wiring and firing and wiring, and you start laying down the neurological circuits in your brain to use. And that means then you just might naturally begin to think in different ways. You might actually start acting in different ways because you've primed your brain into the future. And so people started latching onto this, and the experiments on mental rehearsal also show that you could actually change your body just by thought alone. And research has also shown that men that close their eyes and mentally rehearse doing bicep curls just for an hour a day for 2 weeks and bring an emotion, strong emotion in there, like stronger, more intense, more passionate, and they call up that emotion. At the end of 2 weeks, their biceps are 13% stronger, but they never lifted a weight, just like the piano players never lifted a finger. So now the body is beginning to respond to the mind, and rehearsal then can begin to prime the body into the future instead of the past. So I started exploring all this research on mental rehearsal, and it started to make sense to me then that people were going from one personality, thinking, acting, and feeling, becoming so conscious of their unconscious self that they would never go unconscious again. And at the same time, they were creating consciously a new self and repeating it so many times that they were unconsciously becoming that person. In other words, the firing and wiring made it easier for them to act and think that way. And many of them got so involved in the rehearsal that the thoughts in their mind literally became the experience, which means they started feeling the emotions of their future before it happened. Now remember, the environment signals the gene. The end product of an experience in the environment is an emotion. And we're talking about now signaling the gene ahead of the environment. They weren't waiting for something outside of them to make them feel that emotion. They weren't waiting for their healing then to feel gratitude and wholeness. They started feeling gratitude and wholeness as a result of their rehearsal. And their body, as their unconscious mind, began to believe it was living in that future reality in the present moment. And they began to select and instruct new genes that made new proteins, and proteins are responsible for the structure and function of your body, and the expression of proteins is the expression of life. And I was mystified by this because most people try to create a new personal reality as the same personality, and it doesn't work. You literally have to become someone else. And so I got very deep into the neuroscience and the epigenetics of personal change and transformation. And it started answering a lot of questions for me about how people could have a spontaneous remission, or what I call a quantum healing. And some of those remissions weren't so spontaneous, they were intentional. And then the last thing that I found so unusual was that the other commonality is that when people were truly involved in the creative process and they were in the inward journey, that they had long moments where they lost track of time and space. They were so much in the present moment that when they opened their eyes from their inner work and connecting to that intelligence and becoming conscious of who they no longer wanted to be and becoming conscious of who they did want to be, that when they opened their eyes, they expected it to be 15 or 20 minutes later, and it was like an hour and 20 minutes later. And what was the science or the physiology behind that? And it turns out that the creative center, the frontal lobe, which is 40% of your entire brain, is really the workshop of possibilities. And as they were selecting new possibilities from the quantum field and beginning to live in that future reality in the present moment, they were combining a clear intention with an elevated emotion. They were disconnecting from all the people and objects and things and places in their outer world. They were sitting still in their body and their brain was in trance, and they forgot that they had a body. They forgot about people in their life. They forgot about their cell phone, objects in their life. They forgot about their computer, their home. They even forgot about the place where they were sitting or the place they needed to go. Their body relaxed into the present moment and they got beyond time. And in a sense, they became nobody, no one, no thing, nowhere, and no time. And I thought, wow, how does that work in the brain? And the frontal lobe actually is like a volume control. And it lowers the volume to the circuits in your brain that have to do with everything known to you. It shuts out all the stimulation in your outer world. It shuts down the sensory mechanisms and motor senses in your body. And it literally cools off the circuits of where you think you need to be at a certain time. And that's when the thought in your mind literally becomes the experience. And when you lose track of space and time from a quantum perspective, you're leaving this three-dimensional reality and you're entering the world of possibility. And so then Einstein said, time and space are not conditions in which we live, but modes in which we think. So they were so in the present moment that they weren't trying to predict the future or living in the past. And the quantum model of reality says that all possibilities exist in the eternal now. So this opened the door for me to start investigating quantum physics, because what was that all about? And quantum physics says subjective mind begins to produce an effect on the objective world. That means mind and matter are so commingled that it's impossible to separate the two. But then when I started talking to colleagues of mine that were quantum physicists, they would always say to me, well, you know, mind and matter are actually inextricably combined, but it only happens on the subatomic level, the subatomic level of electrons and photons, but not on a big scale of objects and things. That the observer effect, the scientists go to measure an electron and it turns from a field of energy, possibility, could be anywhere around the nucleus of the atom, and it collapses into a particle called collapsing the wave function or the quantum event. That when Einstein and Planck began looking at this, the tiny world of electrons and photons didn't behave like the large world of apples falling from trees or rotation of planets around the sun. It was a very different, unpredictable world. Whereas Newtonian physics was very predictable, the quantum was very unpredictable. So they knew that the electron was going to collapse from energy into matter as a particle, from a wave to a particle, but they couldn't predict where. So it began my interest because my colleagues would say that only works for the very tiny, but not for the very large. The observer does have an effect on the subatomic world, but not on big events in our lives. And I used to say to them, well, maybe we're just poor observers. Maybe we can master the skill of observation. So when I started investigating quantum physics then, I wanted to understand how we could exert greater effects on the nature of reality. And when we live by the hormones of stress, believing that we're a body, because the hormones of stress cause us to be aroused and the adrenaline causes us to focus on our body, that the rush of adrenaline causes us to pay attention more to our outer world, to people and objects and things and places, and to obsess about time. So if our attention is on the body, the environment, and time, then where we place our attention is where we place our energy. Then all of our attention and energy is invested into this three-dimensional reality. And if it's invested in this three-dimensional reality, that's where all our energy attention is, then we have to play by the rules of Newtonian physics, which means that everything that we want to create is going to take time, or better yet, we're in the illusion of matter, and we are matter trying to change matter. And when we're that, we're always trying to control and force and predict outcomes in our life. And so then how do we go as a consciousness, taking our consciousness out of this three-dimensional reality and begin to become comfortable in a place where you have no body, where there's no one, there's no thing, there's no place, and there's no time? And can we exist as a consciousness in this realm called the quantum field? And if we're a consciousness in the field, and Einstein said the field is the sole governing agency of the particle. He didn't say the particle controls the particle. He said the field controls the particle. If we can get to the place of living in that field as an awareness, as a consciousness, dissociated from everything material, then we're disinvesting our attention and energy out of this three-dimensional reality, everything that's known, and we're investing our attention and energy in the unknown. So if you can invest your attention and energy in the unknown, it makes sense then that you're in the realm of possibility. And the longer you can connect to the unknown, the more you create new opportunities in your life. So I thought, well, now that I understand this, I wrote a book about it called Evolve Your Brain. And then I was in a documentary called What the Bleep Do You Know? And that began people's awareness to begin to think about the philosophy of this, all these sciences. But when we started doing conferences all around the world, and we had panel discussions, I paid attention to the questions that people asked. And the questions were, okay, so our thoughts create our reality. That sounds really great. I understand that. So they watched the movie several times to understand it. Then they said, well, now that I understand that, how do we do it? And I thought that was a brilliant question. The second question was, okay, our personality creates our personal reality. If I want to create a new personal reality, I got to change my personality. Why is it so hard to change? I thought that was even a better question. And then people asked, well, what do you do? And I thought that was a reasonable question as well. So I started teaching workshops, one-day workshops, an evening and a one-day workshop, and bringing in brain science and brain waves and electromagnetism and epigenetics and neuroplasticity and neuroendocrinology and hormones, and to build a model, quantum physics, to build a model and then have people begin the basic levels of training. And I thought, my goodness, it makes sense then if I could take the same principles that I used, that I saw with the people that had spontaneous remissions, the same model of unlearning and relearning, of breaking the habit of the old self and reinventing the new self, pruning synaptic connections and sprouting new connections, deprogramming and reprogramming, losing your mind and creating a new one, unmemorizing emotions and habits that are stored in the body and then reconditioning the body to a new mind and to a new emotion, to literally disinvest your energy out of the familiar past and begin to invest it in a new future. That if I understood the science behind that, and I saw it work for people that had spontaneous healings and remissions, let's use the same principles and create a meditation where people then could disconnect from their outer environment, to sit their body down and get beyond their body and transcend time. And the purpose of meditation then is to begin to think and feel independent of the conditions in your outer world, and change the way you think and feel to see if you can begin to produce effects in your outer world, and to get beyond the analytical mind. And what separates the conscious mind from the subconscious mind is the analytical mind. And it turns out that when we're driven by the hormones of stress, the arousal of those chemicals causes us to overanalyze, to become overfocused. It causes us to begin to become overcritical. It causes us to loop in our brains. So when we're living by the hormones of stress, of course, we're narrowing our focus on matter because that's where the danger is. But reality is both particle and wave, according to the quantum model. It's both matter and energy. So how do we then get people then beyond that state? So I thought, well, goodness, if they could change their brainwaves, if they can go from a narrow focus to an open focus, to then begin to put their attention on energy instead of matter, would it begin to create more coherence and more order in the brain? And At the same time, would they be able to change their brainwaves? And if they slowed their brainwaves down, would they get beyond their analytical mind and then enter the operating system where all those programs exist, subconscious programs that make up 95% of who we are by the time we're 35? Now they could begin to reorganize limited habits and behaviors and emotional reactions to more productive ones. So we taught these workshops, and the concept of meditation really, the symbol means to become familiar with. And I thought that was so significant when I started studying this, because you have to become familiar with your unconscious thoughts. You have to become so conscious of them that you don't go unconscious to them and believe them any longer. You got to begin to become aware and familiar with your automatic behaviors and habits. And you have to become so conscious of even what you say that you don't go unconscious in your day. And then you have to look at certain emotions that you live by every day and begin to realize, my goodness, I've been feeling guilt or shame or unworthiness for the last 30 years, but I didn't think it was guilt because it just feels like me. So then, as we begin to become familiar with the old self, it's time to become familiar with a new self. So this is what we've been doing. What thoughts do you want to fire and wire in your brain? What behaviors do you want to demonstrate and rehearse mentally? What emotions do you want to live by every day and condition your body into that state? So then if you keep doing that over and over again, you'll become familiar with a new self. And so the model started to kind of fit. So we taught these workshops for a couple of years all around the world, and we saw some changes, but no real significant changes. There were changes that started to progress, but after each event, people would say, can you teach another level? And can you teach another level after that? And so we kept progressing the teachings even more and more. We did level 2 events, level 3 events, advanced events. And then right around this time when we started teaching events a little bit past the level 3, we started seeing really significant changes in people's lives, not just their health, but they started having new opportunities and new things and new careers and wealth and healings. And now I knew something was starting to happen. There was a momentum. And I watched people with MS step out of wheelchairs, and I saw all kinds of changes taking place. And now I knew that something was happening. So I wrote my second book called Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, and that was the how-to to be able to demystify the process. And when we started seeing these changes, and there was this kind of momentum going on, I realized now that I had to start doing some measurements because I wanted to know that those changes were measurable and they weren't just subjective, but they were objective. So I gathered a team of researchers and scientists, and we stopped doing those one-day events, and we started teaching these progressive workshops, which was a Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday, where I would give people all the information and a more advanced version of that basic level teaching. And then I wanted to do these 4.5-day events. We call them advanced workshops, where we brought in a team of scientists and researchers, and we did brain scans on people before they came to the event. Then they went through 4.5 days of training, and then we scanned their brain at the end of the event. And I wanted to know that the changes weren't just in their mind, that they were in their brain. And then we did something really important, and we started studying people in real time during the meditative process. And I wanted to see if they were able to create more brain coherence. I wanted to see if they were able to focus and sustain a certain amount of intention, and what does it look like when the brain finally starts to change, and could they change their brain waves and sustain those changes, and for how long, and what was the ratio of change that took place from the beginning of the event to the end of the event, and what happens when you analyze your life within some emotion. Do you make your brain better or worse? And so we started gathering all this information, and it helped me to teach transformation a lot better. And I wanted to close the gap between knowledge and experience. And we've done thousands and thousands of brain scans since. We did 19 advanced workshops. We also know that when there's a coherent brain, that you think better, that you are more clear, that your brain is more holistic and more unified, and that when you're living by stress and you're reacting and thinking about people and things and places, and your brain is aroused, and it's aroused to a high beta brainwave state, that you're going to burn out, and that the brain is not firing in any level of order, and there's incoherence in the brain, and when the brain is incoherent, we're incoherent. So going from a narrow focus to the open focus and connecting to that unified field and putting your attention on it. That unified field is an invisible field of organized energy, greater levels of order that connects everything material. If people could really place their attention on it and connect with it, would the brain become more orderly? And the answer was yes, and we started seeing that. By the same means, in order to create a new future, it requires a clear intention and an elevated emotion. Could we train people then to go from resentment or impatience or frustration, where the heart beats out of rhythm incoherently? In other words, you're stepping on the gas and the brake at the same time. You know, you're running all these arousal chemicals and your heart is racing because it believes in the survival state. It's being chased by a predator. It's pumping blood to the extremities, but you're not running, fighting, or hiding. Can people then begin to trade the addiction of those survival emotions for an elevated heart-centered emotion? And this center, the heart, is the union of polarity, the union of duality, the union of opposites. This is our creative center. That when we live by stress, we draw from this invisible field of energy. We draw our vital life force and turn it into chemistry. And that vital life force, that invisible field of energy around our body shrinks. And so now we tap the vital resources that we need to create with, to heal with. And we feel more like matter trapped in space and time and less like energy connected to something greater. But when the heart then begins to function in a more coherent way, the heart begins to produce a very, very measurable magnetic field when it becomes coherent. And that magnetic field then is an energy, and that energy is a frequency, and all frequency carries information. So when people begin to lay the coherent thought on that coherent energy, so the combination of brain coherence and heart coherence begins to change a person's energy. When people change their energy, they change their life. And when energy makes it into the heart, it begins to amplify energy into the brain. Now the brain starts to switch on. We did the measurements to prove that that association exists. So I wanted to see then if our students then could sustain a certain degree of heart coherence and sustain it for an extended period of time so that they could self-regulate, that they could return back into their lives and stay in that place and not react, and create a shorter refractory period to the emotions that keep us in stress and survival. It's not that we react, it's the question is how long we react. So by creating that kind of heart coherence and being able to sustain it then, was it possible then, if people could do that for an extended period of time, that if they were going to create a new future, and this is the creative center, this is where energy connects us to the field, if they're going to believe in a future that they're imagining with all of their heart, then it makes sense it better be open and activated. So we did thousands of HRV measurements to make sure our students could do it and sustain it. As a result of that, we started measuring neurotransmitters, and we saw love chemicals like oxytocin begin to elevate, serotonin, melatonin levels, and all kinds of significant changes take place in our students' brain and heart and chemistry in 4 days. And so then we started doing measurements to see if a person, when they trade that cortisol, the stress hormone, for an elevated emotion like gratitude or love, is it possible then that they could switch their immune system on? In other words, cortisol means all our energy is going out for some emergency out there. And when that happens, there's no energy in our inner environment for growth and repair because of all of our energy going towards our outer environment. Is it possible then, when they started cultivating these elevated emotions, if they could signal the gene to strengthen an immune system? And we found that 4 days, people's immune system strengthened by 40% just by trading fear or hostility or anger or frustration or sadness for joy, inspiration, love, gratitude, or appreciation. So then we also started looking at genetic expression, and we did a genes analysis, and in 4 days, we found people could signal 8 new genes that they had in common. Genes for neurogenesis, the growth of new neurons in response to novel experiences. Genes that stimulate stem cells, those cells that can become any other cell in your body, that they would go to damaged tissues and repair them. That gene was signaled. The gene for oxidative stress to increase lifespan and to reduce aging. The gene for the microtubules to begin to give the cell more integrity and more structure and emit more coherent light and information. 2 genes that suppress cancer growth and tumors, and even genes for hormonal balance with the pituitary, the thyroid, and the pancreas. So in 4 days, people became their own genetic engineer, and I started realizing that common people around the world can actually do the uncommon, and the evidence then would correlate with a lot of the healings that we started seeing. Now, as a result of this, people got better at doing the work. The formula became more of a skill, and they could change their brain waves in 4 seconds, in 5 seconds, in 9 seconds, in 12 seconds. They mastered the skill of being able to get beyond their analytical mind. By the same means, after our first 2 advanced workshops, we saw that 80% of our student body had a more than 90% change in their brain for the better. That's a very big statistic. That's significant. So we've measured telomeres, and the little shoestrings on the end of your DNA that determines your biological age. And in 60 days, people doing their meditation 5 out of 7 days, 74% of those people lengthened their telomeres. That means they lengthened their life to some degree. They got part of their life back. And what if they did it for an extended period of time? Would they be changing their genetic destiny? So right around the time when I was doing the advanced workshops, I wrote another book called You Are the Placebo, and really it began to cause me to think in different ways and realize that if you can give someone a sugar pill, a saline injection, perform some false surgery or treatment, and a certain percentage of those people can accept, believe, and surrender to the thought that they're getting the actual substance or treatment, and they begin to program their autonomic nervous system to make their own pharmacy of chemicals that match the exact same drug or treatment they think they're taking. Was it the inert substance that was doing the healing? Was it the body's innate capacity to heal? So the question is, if you understand the science behind the placebo, can you teach it to people? In other words, when a person gets a sugar pill and the doctor tells them this is a new drug for Parkinson's disease or a new drug for pain, and the person looks at that pill and they've been conditioned to believe that pills make them feel better, and the moment they get that pill acts as a symbol of possibility. So the moment they start thinking, I could get better, they're selecting a new potential in the quantum field by thought alone. And then they're combining that thought with an elevated emotion like gratitude or inspiration or enthusiasm or optimism. And when you combine a clear intention with an elevated emotion, not only are you changing your state of being, but you're changing your biology as well. And you begin to program your autonomic nervous system in a different way. And not only are you beginning to change your biology and your neurocircuitry and your genes, but you're also changing your energy. That the heart then begins to produce that field. The intent, the thought can ride on that emotional or energetic state, and people begin to change their frequency. So I thought, well, then can we teach people to do that without an exogenous or external substance? And the answer is yes, because you don't need that sugar pill. If a person understands how to do the work properly, all they need is the ability to hold a clear intention and create the elevated emotion and change their state of being. So then that accelerated a lot of the health changes that we started seeing in all cultures around the world. And so that leads me to kind of where we are today. All the data that we've gathered proves to us that we have within our reach the abilities to begin to not only change our personality, to change our personal reality, to change our bodies, to change our lives, but what about those mystical moments where we have a transcendental experience, where we're not awake, we're not asleep, we're not dreaming, but we're somewhere else, that transcendental moment where you transcend the known self. What is that? And how does that all work? And so we started teaching our students how to activate the latent systems in the brain and body that literally create the mystical experience. And what are those latent systems? How do they work? How do the physics of the quantum begin to be integrated into our biology. And so we started doing extensive work on this particular area of the brain called the pineal gland, and what it is to activate that little antenna in the back of the brain that is a radio receiver that begins to take certain neurotransmitters like serotonin and melatonin and begin to secrete upgraded versions of them that begin to cause the mystical to happen, to cause a person to have a full-on sensory experience without their senses, that they are having an inward experience that is a vision that's more real, and they're more aware in that experience than any past external experience. And what are the effects of that? So if a person has a betrayal or a shock, and that experience is, branded neurologically in their brain and emotionally conditioned in their body, and it's that experience that begins to signal the wrong gene. When these people have a moment where the joy or the bliss or the ecstasy is greater than the betrayal, and they feel so altered inside of them, and the pictures are so real inside of them, the inner experience then literally begins to wash the past away. Now, what's the side effect of that? We've seen instantaneous healings in people's bodies as a result of some inward event that seemed so real. Not once, not twice, not 10 times, not 50 times. We're starting to see it hundreds and hundreds of times. So we started looking at the brain scans during the mystical experience, and there's absolutely a pattern that the brain goes into this super conscious, super aroused state where the person's brain is literally altered by energy. There's a level of coherence that's transcendent of anything normal, way beyond normal, that in a matter of moments, the autonomic nervous system becomes highly activated. The pineal gland, you can see the pineal gland active as well. And all of a sudden, I began to realize that this pattern that we're seeing over and over again, that we're able to predict and reproduce. So then people think they want their health, they think they want their wealth, they think they want their new career, they think they want a new relationship. That's the illusion. What they really want is to become something. It's not about that. It's who you become. And becoming is a level of wholeness that if you're so integrated neurologically, biologically, chemically, hormonally, genetically, you're so whole in heart and mind that you feel like you have everything. You're no longer in lack or separation. And this actually becomes the perfect place to create from. So we decided then to change our 4.5-day events to week-long events. Now, in those 4.5-day events, a lot goes on. We teach people how walking meditation, a standing meditation, a seated meditation, a laying down meditation. We teach them certain breaths. We teach them how to create trance. We teach them how to create a movie of their future and in trance begin to program their subconscious mind into that future. We teach them how to program the mystical. We teach them how to create something out of nothing. We teach them how to connect to that field and unfold deeper and deeper into it so they're comfortable without a face, without a body, without a name, without a diet, without their pain or disease, just to become an awareness and to dissociate from everything in this three-dimensional world. And that's how they begin to exert greater effects on their lives. And so when we started going to these week-long events, we've diminished the amount of training and measurements that we were doing, and decided that if the people after these 4-day events were having tremendous breakthroughs and they had to go back to their lives, what if I had them for 7 days? So the extra 3 days in these advanced workshops, these week-long events, and the new things we're doing there, we're teaching people how to create coherence and healing others. And we've seen people get their hearing back, their eyesight back. We've seen people's tumors disappear. We've seen neuropathies and Parkinson's disease. Literally all kinds of health conditions begin to diminish in a matter of moments. And I have to say, I'm really more surprised than anybody else, number one. And number two, this is a dream that I've always had, but I never thought really that we would arrive at it. And so the week-long events, we go deeper, and they're super exciting, and I can work further with people. And now they've practiced brain and heart coherence for so long in a quiet room or a room with 1,000 other people, and there's soft music going on, and there's no threats or there's no challenges. And our research shows that they can create brain and heart coherence because they develop the skills. So now we're setting up conditions called challenge activities and putting people in situations where they normally would feel fear or anxiety or frustration, where they don't think they have control over those emotional states. And right in that moment, eyes open, do they have the ability to self-regulate, to turn fear and calm the body down into something else? So the answer is that a certain percentage of our students are actually going beyond where they thought they could, and that's where the magic happens. So to self-regulate, when you feel those emotional states, is when it matters the most. So if we set up the conditions that challenge a person way beyond what they think they could do, and they're able to diminish those emotions, when they return back into their lives, number one, they'll be able to say, I just did this most amazing thing. This challenge in my life is nothing compared to what I did. And number two, when they start feeling those emotions, they can pause for a moment and begin to change it, to not let the emotions consume them, to be able to really be greater than them. So we've done several week-long events now this year. I want to keep doing them because the magic has been really profound. So as a result of that, I wrote a book last year called Becoming Supernatural. And it's about how common people are doing the uncommon. And in that book, I talk about all the different things we do in our advanced workshops and spend a lot of time talking about that mystical moment. We also do one last thing that I find really important, because if you get a group of people together and you have people wearing heart rate monitors sitting in the front of the room, and you have 1,000 people in the room, and the rest of the student body is moving into a state where they're connecting to the field and raising their energy and beginning to create heart and brain coherence. If they send the thought or intent to the people in the front of the room wearing the monitors, that their bodies be healed, that their lives be enriched, that their dreams come true, that the mystical find them, would that energy carrying that intention begin to influence the autonomic nervous system of people sitting in the front of the room? And we've seen many, many times that many of those people wearing the heart rate monitors, all their hearts go into coherence at the exact same time, at the exact same day, in the exact same meditation. So it begs the question then, in a non-local way, people being influenced by energy, is it possible then that we can really begin to influence the world? And so we've done 4 Project Coherence healings where we've gathered our community of students all over the world and did a global meditation really to begin to change the energy of the planet. Now, if a person moves into true heart coherence, is it possible then that everybody that they know or relate with could feel those effects? And there's scientific evidence to show that brain and heart coherence can be changed in a non-local way. So if we have enough students doing this, and our last one we had 40,000 people participate in, if we are literally going to go and change the world in some way from war and violence and anger and prejudice and hostility and fear and lack and deception into something else, then maybe it's important for us to begin to develop this skill. But I do think that there's been enough peace-gathering projects that have been documented. You know, I think there were 23 peer-reviewed articles on the power of the prayer or peace gatherings. But I do think that it's not enough to just do that, because I think the research shows that when the peace-gathering projects end, many people leave, that the crime levels and the violence and everything returns back to a normal level. That it's not enough to just do that. We have to live the prayer. We have to demonstrate peace. We have to demonstrate it in all areas of our lives, and that's what our student body is working on. That they're eyes open in their life, conscious, eyes open. They're demonstrating the greatest ideal of themselves, so that they give people permission to do the same. So my work and my passion really is about human transformation. That I find no greater joy or no greater gift than to contribute to the world in some way and give them the tools, hopefully, that they can begin to prove to themselves really how powerful they are. And when people begin to gather in a community and they have a passion for the unknown, and they collectively are moving as one mind, one heart in an event, there comes a moment where they begin to break through. And if you can set up the conditions in their environment and give them the proper instruction and challenge them a little bit more, it only takes one person then to prove that it's possible. And we are piercing this veil right now, just like the 4-minute mile. After the 4-minute mile was broken, there was an awareness that it was possible, then everybody started doing it. By the same means, we're seeing people stand on the stage with all kinds of health conditions and tell their story. And I witnessed then the audience begin to become moved by it. And not only are they laying footprints in the field for other people to begin to step into, you know, it's in the field, it's an experience that's now logged in the quantum field. But by the same means, the evidence in three-dimensional reality causes less separation. People realize that if that person can do it and they don't look any different than me, then it's possible that I can do it. And so there's a quickening going on right now because a community of people, they're emerging with the understanding that it is possible, and they're relying less on external or exogenous substances. And I like that because just like an infection spreads amongst a community and creates disease, I think that health and wellness and abundance or joy can be as infectious as disease. And the student body that I'm very proud of, every day they do the work. Every day they wake up in the morning and choose to be the creator of their lives instead of the victim of their lives. And it takes work. It's not easy, but it's a skill just like anything else. You get better at it, and you begin to enjoy the creative process. And when we get to this point, then creation just becomes the new habit, and we break the old habit of our own personal limitations. So it's been a joy and an honor to participate in this journey and begin to see some of the fruits of our efforts. I hope to see you sometime soon. Thank you.